Well, isn't that just a coincidence? Have you ever had something happen randomly that was so perfect it seemed like it must have been intentional? I like to tell the story of how my wife and I met. I spent my elementary years in Northern Virginia. My dad had moved his sailboat from the Potomac River to the Chesapeake Bay. The drive to the marina was an hour and a half, and he really wanted to live closer to his boat. One day in 1982, while driving from the bay, he noticed the Apple Green neighborhood but missed the turn. Thinking he could grab a back road into the neighborhood, he turned down Ward Road. He couldn't find a road to Apple Green, but he did find a house for sale on Haven Lane. My dad made an offer, but the owner rejected it. About a year later, my parents got a call from the owner of the home who said he would accept their offer. We moved to Haven Lane in 1983. A few years later, a man was driving around with his family looking for a home that was closer to work and school. I was outside playing with some friends when he pulled over and asked if we knew of a house for sale. Trying to be funny, my friend JR said, "Sure, I'll sell you my house." Well, he pulled up in my friend's driveway and knocked on the door. Little did JR know that his mom was thinking of selling their house. The family made an offer on the house, but it was rejected. A few months later, JR's mom called and accepted the offer, and the family moved in next door on Halloween in 1986. The family had 2 daughters, and one of them is now my wife. We met and started dating a little less than a year after they moved in. It felt like God navigated a number of unlikely events to put us together. It just couldn't be a coincidence. At least, that's what I tell myself. So was this a coincidence? Was God moving in the details to put Kristen and I together so that we could be agents of sanctification for each other and a testimony of Jesus to the world? Or was this just one of many possible outcomes that may or may not have pleased God? At the end of the day, we can't really answer these questions. I can only look at what the Bible tells me about God and think about that in relation to my life. When all is said and done, and I have made decisions, I will be held accountable, not only for what I've done, but also the motivations behind those decisions. So what do we know about how God works? Proverbs 21 verse 1 has something interesting to say about it. A king's heart is like channeled water in the Lord's hand. He directs it wherever he chooses. Think about the Exodus. God was working behind the scenes for purposes that were greater than the individual experiences of each Hebrew. God was making a statement for the world to see. There's no one like God. When we look at the story of the Bible, we can see that perhaps it is wiser to consider ourselves a part of God's story, rather than our life being the point of God's story. One of the most direct statements about God's working in the details of history is found in Acts chapter 17. Paul says, "From one man, God has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so that they might seek God, and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one of us." In the story today, we will see a lot of coincidences. The details come together in such a way that we have to see the Lord's sovereign hand working to make his plan and his promises come about. As you consider this story, think about how God is still actively working today to fulfill his promises. So, is God working out the details of your life for a specific purpose? I don't really know. However, I do know that it is possible. I also know that we are to make decisions that are gospel-centered, Jesus-proclaiming, other-centered, and virtuous. If we do this, we will find ourselves in the center of God's glorious will. I know this is an old movie, But perhaps Forrest Gump was onto something when he analyzed the bizarre circumstances of his life while speaking at the grave site where his wife was buried. He says, "I don't know if Mama was right or if it's Lieutenant Dan. I don't know if we each have a destiny or if we're all just floating around accidental-like on a breeze. But I think maybe it's both. Maybe both is happening at the same time. If you believe that God is moving the hearts of kings, leaders, and sees the tragic details of the ordinary life of man, just like he did with Job or Abraham, if God sees the falling of a sparrow, the hairs on your head, and does not delight in the deaths of even the wicked, then what does that say about your life, regardless of what it may seem like to you? If it is possible that God is in the details of your life, how do you view those details differently? And beyond this, will you make decisions, often exceedingly difficult decisions, that are in line with God's heart, knowing that through your faithfulness, God just might be changing the world, and thus changing eternity?